Hello, I'm James Stephen, technology journalist at UC Today. Joining me is Paul Cottee, the director in the product team at NICE, in the compliance line of business. And today we'll be discussing compliance regulations. Hello, Paul, how are you?
Hi, James. Really well, thank you.
So you tell us a little bit about what's going on in the world of compliance. Why are companies taking it more seriously all of a sudden?
Given our audience, we're obviously talking about communications compliance, and I think what's going on at the moment, the real buzzy thing going on at the moment, is the fines that came out from the CFTC and the SEC just in recent weeks. Depending on which publication you read, you're seeing various amounts. I actually tend to look at the headline and the headline number going back to December when these fines started coming out. And if we think back that far, then we're up to 2.1 billion US dollars in fines for the banks that have been hit so far. This has created a bit of a buzz because the SEC and CFTC regulations that they're using to ping these banks, there's analogous regulations in other jurisdictions around the world. There's analogous regulation in Europe through Article 16 of MiFID. The FCA handbook has got analogous regulations. Most of the major jurisdictions around the world have these sorts of regulations whereby you have to record business communications and retain them and have them available for the appropriate regulator should they come a knocking. And what we found, or what the SEC and CFTC have found, is that in a lot of cases, these communications were not being captured. Now, if they're not captured, that means that they can't be made available to the regulator. So the regulators have been pinging banks on the two fronts there. A inevitably leads to B. Why are companies taking it seriously all of a sudden? Well, they should have been taking it seriously a long time ago. If you go back several years, I think even back into the mid noughties, there were fines for record keeping violations and so on. And it really has bubbled up now. But also, I think, interestingly, in terms of why a company's taking it seriously, I think I would direct people to the statement of CFTC Commissioner Romero, and she made a couple of blistering comments in her statement, saying that the firms that they'd gone to, there was a lot of obfuscation, there was a lot of evasion. This was happening at very senior level, and she was saying that firms should no longer wait for the regulators to come around with enforcement actions. They need to get on the front foot. So I think if you imagine a room of people sort of sitting around a table with their feet up on the table reading the newspaper, suddenly someone's come in the front door and said, the regulators are coming, and they're all jumping out of their chairs and putting the newspapers away, because the regulators, the regulators have put them on notice. And she made the point in her statement that, the CFTC and the SEC have put most of these actions in one hit deliberately to grab the headline. They've done this for a reason. Sure, there was the one back in December, but these other ones, they've put them all together and aggregated them. They want to get the headline. They want to get the hit. They want this to be seen. They want companies to start doing something. It's no longer drip, drip, drip feed of, we'll go and hit that company, and then a few months later we go and hit that one. No, they've gone bang. This is all in one big thing. And they're basically saying, even just in the last few days, there's more stuff coming out from the SEC saying, we're not just going after the big boys. We're doing this across the market. If you're an RIA, you're an investment advisor or a fund operator, we're going to be looking at you as well. So, we've already found these companies. For most of these companies, the quantum is not huge. I mean, $200 million is $200 million. But if you're a tier one bank, then $200 million is almost a rounding error in terms of your results. So the quantum is big enough to get a headline. And if you put it all together and you think about that 2.1 billion, that's big enough to get a headline. They're not at this point trying to do anything that's going to, really upset the business, but they are sending a very clear signal, a very clear shot across the bows of senior management. You need to pull your socks up here. We're coming around. We're looking at you. You're on notice. This is just the first it's not pay to play. They're not just, it shouldn't be seen as a cost of doing business. You need to take this seriously. We're going to be coming after you in the C-suite individually. That's what they're basically saying here. So
Okay.
it's a long answer, but it's an important point right now.
Yeah. And so what are some of these regulations and what do they require businesses to do?
Like I said, there's analogous regulations in most of the major jurisdictions around the world. If we look at the CFTC rules, there's Rule 17A. There's several parts of it depending on which bit of these fines you look at. But if we start off with 17A3, then that lists out what you're supposed to record. 17A4 lists out the fact that you need to record it, and then further regulations indicate that you, as I say, having recorded it, you need to make it available to the regulators. And like I said, if you haven't done the recording, then you can't make it available to the regulators. So if you've already, stuffed up on part one of that, then you're going to, find yourself coming a cropper on part two. Article 16 of MiFID II contains a similar sort of requirement for investment firms to record and retain and make available. There's actually a plethora of regulations because we also start getting into, so if we think of just the recording and the record keeping part of it, that's one part of it. As I say, it's actually retaining the records and making them available. But if we look at the MiFID regulations as well, there's a requirement that the firm does everything, or takes all reasonable steps to record on the one hand, or that's more of a requirement, but also takes all reasonable steps to make sure, and this was quite prescient if we think back to, MiFID II was written 8 years ago or so ago now, the firm has to take all reasonable steps to make sure that business communications do not take place on unrecorded platforms. So they're getting it from both sides. Not only is there a requirement to do the recording, but there's also an onus on the firms to make sure that people aren't doing it off-piste, if you like. And that's where all this is coming up. That's why we're seeing, managing directors of investment banks getting fired for doing chats over, WhatsApp and so on. So it's pretty, at the first level, it's pretty simple. The devil with all these things is always in the detail, and these can be quite costly. And okay, if someone's, if we haven't had time, if we think back to March, April of 2020, firms hadn't had the time by that stage to distribute, firm configured and firm, company owned and company configured mobile communications devices by that stage. So people were having no choice but to use their mobile phones. If you're in the office on a Friday and you're in a dealing room and you're not allowed to use your mobile phone on the floor, and then all of a sudden the next Monday you get an email saying don't come into work, you're going to have to do it all from home and you're going to have to use your own mobile device, then the problem is that the compliance environment, the control environment sort of falls away at that point. And you really are sort of relying on people to do the right thing just because they're good people. But at that point, likewise, you probably haven't even thought of what you need to put on, the apps that you might need to send around to someone's phone, and you probably haven't got the back end that connects to sort of our, the kind of solutions that we offer. And that all came. But, if we think about the FCA, most regulators, but, if I just take the FCA as an example, they were very clear in the first instance that they would give a bit of forbearance with the record keeping requirements in terms of, okay, we understand you don't have to, you can't record everything. We can't actually voice record everything. But what you're going to have to do is take really good notes. You're going to have to write things down. And they were pretty prescriptive about this. You're going to have to, write down what you did and every trade and every bit of advice you gave and so on. You're going to have to put down, timestamp it and so on. But then after a while, they said, right, this is the new normal. We've gone through the business continuity part of this. We are where we are. This is going to be going on for a while. So our forbearance is going to wind down. And then later on in one of the later market watches, they said, right, this is the new normal and our forbearance has wound down and you're going to have this. We now expect you to have these control environments in place. You should have been able to put this in place by now. So, but then businesses, requiring what do businesses have to do? They've also got to balance that with, with GDPR and data protection things as well. I'm an ex-compliance officer. You know, I will do what I have to do on the financial markets compliance side, and that is, record everything. I'll leave the data protection side and how long we have to retain things for and what should and should not be recorded. I'll leave that to the data protection guys in the firm. And from my days in the business, we had a little bit of tension there, but we usually managed to find a way through it. And when we did have those deliberations, we made sure that we wrote everything down. We would come to a decision. Excuse me, and we would memorialize that decision. And if a regulator came around and said, well, why aren't you retaining these particular these particular communications, or why aren't you retaining them for this length of time? We were able to say, well, this is why we thought about it, and on balance between the financial markets requirement and the data protection requirement, this is the decision we've come to. So, so what are firms required to do? Look at the rules. Make sure you understand what the rules are. Make sure you understand what the obligations are, both on the actual, from the financial market side. The technology stack that you've got can actually do that, but then also you do need to involve your data controllers and your data protection side, and get their input and make sure they're happy, and memorialize it, write it all down.
Okay. Now, presumably most businesses have already got some sort of compliance solution in place.
Hope so.
So what are they lacking which could help to protect them from incurring these huge fines?
Therein lies the question. It's 64. Do we still talk about $64,000, or has it gone up to 64 million? That's the really operative question here. What were these businesses lacking? Now, I can pretty much guarantee that all of the banks that were fined probably had. I'll stick my neck out here and say, they're all competent businesses. I'm very sure that they all would have had policies in place saying that all communications need to be done over recorded channels. I think what reading between the lines of what the SEC and CFTC said, the policy, just having a policy is no longer good enough. You need to back it up with action. And action can be firing a couple of people who use WhatsApp when they shouldn't. It can be putting technology in place. It can be sending around, company phones and with company apps. Look, at the end of the day, if someone is working from home, you can't stop them using their own mobile device. But but if you need to make it pretty clear that if that is found out, the company's going to come down like a ton of bricks. I'm not going to tell anyone on this call how to do their job, but you need to be taking pretty stringent action. As I say, the policy is no longer good enough. But again, going back to what Commissioner Romero said, this started at the top, and what I'm finding interesting every time I read her comments, something new sticks out at me. And I reread it yesterday, and what jumped out at me in my rereading of it yesterday was her discussion about culture. If we think about it, the CFTC and the SEC here, and I'm sure that we'll see other fines from other jurisdictions. They're reframing it. They're saying this is a culture and conduct thing. This comes from the C-suite. She said we saw obfuscation and evasion at the C-suite level, at the senior management level. That's got to stop. So what are some of these businesses lacking? Maybe a bit of gumption at the very senior levels, and a bit of compliance at the senior levels. And when I say compliance, I mean the verb there, because she said some of these senior managers were actually trying to hide things from their own compliance department, but also the regulators. That doesn't look well. If you've got your senior management obfuscating when in front of the regulator, what sort of message does that send to everyone down the chain? So maybe what are some of these businesses lacking? As I say, a little bit of discipline at the top is definitely what the CFTC and the SEC, but definitely in terms of that supporting statement. What are these businesses lacking? Proper tone at the top. That's what she's saying.
Okay, and are there any advantages to having a robust compliance solution other than avoiding fines?
You bet. I mean, avoiding fines is obviously a good one, and as an ex-compliance officer myself, that was always in mind. If we do something wrong, how's it going to look in various publications? So clearly, avoiding a fine and avoiding regulatory opprobrium was something that was uppermost in our minds. But look, as with any compliance program, having a robust program which might involve technological solutions these days, probably almost certainly will involve technological solutions. It means that it makes your business sustainable, and I don't mean that in the sort of the ESG green method. I mean sustainable in terms of you'll keep your license, you'll be able to keep your business going. There's also a point. I spent some time on the buy side myself, and when we were looking at new counterparties, new banks, and so on, one of the things that we looked at was what's their regulatory environment like? Have they been pinged for lots of fines lately? What's their culture like? Do we want to be associated? If we want to keep our brand robust and good, do we want to be associated with a firm that maybe sails a little close to the wind in terms of its own compliance with regulations? So from a sell side perspective, if you blow through regulations too often, it can actually mean that sell siders actually start giving you a little bit of distance. So it actually can impact your business. It also can impact the sort of people you get. If you want to have good, talented people that actually make money the right way, then that I won't say a lot of traders and so on actually look out and say, oh, what's their compliance situation like, in a positive way. But I do think that it goes to culture, and again, that's what Commissioner Romero was saying. It goes to culture. If I want to work at this firm, I look at a particular firm and I want to work there because they've got a good culture. They're not always in the headlines for the wrong reasons, then that actually makes that an attractive employment proposition for a lot of people. So I think it's just good business to have a robust compliance process and solution in place. And that doesn't just apply to this, it applies across the whole of the gamut of compliance.
Okay, and can you tell me about your company's compliance solution at
Sure.
night? What are the main channels that you cover, and what sets it
Everything.
apart?
We see communication as data. Data can be very structured. Everything fits into a particular field, and an automated order flow from a company to an exchange, that will be very, very structured data. At the other end, you've got voice. I'm speaking to you now over a platform, and if there was an automated transcription system running, and those, I can't believe how much better, even in the last, say, 6 to 12 months. If I look at it, I was on a call this morning on one of these platforms, I won't say which one, and it was being transcribed and recorded in real time. And I was looking at the transcription that was coming up, and there were so few mistakes. It was incredible. Whereas, I think back to even 6 or 12 months ago, and little things would creep in. If I think back to 2 years ago, and it's a different ball game completely. So that even that unstructured data is now starting to become more structured. And in the middle, you've got emails and so on, which they're structured in that, okay, I can see what's written on the page, but they're unstructured in terms of it doesn't fit into particularly clear fields, and there might be jargon and so on in a chat, which isn't straightforward. That doesn't bother us at all. We can take, our systems are smart enough to be able to take, or intelligent enough to be able to take input from structured right through to very unstructured data. So what that allows us to do, and I think we're pretty unique in this space, is once it's captured, we can take communications input. As I say, we just see it as data. So we can take it from any platform. You can send us WhatsApp chat. You can send us Telegram, Signal, email, chat, IB, voice, unified communication off the, any of the UC platforms. We can take those in, and as I say, we'll dataize it, if you like. We will record it, we'll retain the recording, and it'll be easily available for the regulator. So all that stuff that the SEC and the CFT said that they needed that wasn't being done, we can do that. Communication channels, as I say, I don't think I've met one yet that we can't pull in. What I think sets us apart is the next piece beyond that. So if we think of the recording and retention platform that we've got, another part of our business is the surveillance platform. I come from a trade surveillance background as well, and that was mainly just looking at trade and order data, and that's very structured. In my days as a compliance officer, I used to spend Friday, the last Friday every month, putting the cans over my ears and doing the listening, the physical monitoring, the random check monitoring that we used to have to do. We can automate all of that now. So not only are we just, as I say, we used to do it on a random sampling basis. Now it's real time. It's done as pretty much as the conversations are taking place or shortly thereafter. So as I say, we're not only able to record them and retain them and present them to the regulator if necessary, but we can actually run surveillance on the communication. So be it a voice or be it a chat or be it an email or whatever, we can actually run surveillance on the communication. And we can actually go one step further, and we can actually tie that in as well to the trade and order data. Now, these are all different modules that can be subscribed to, but from end to end, the communication, the retention, the capture, the record keeping, the retention, right through to the surveillance on the communication itself, and then tying that into the trade surveillance data as well. So it's running the full gamut. It's pretty impressive.
Paul Cottee, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, James. Thanks for asking me to join you. All the best.
And thank you for watching. I'm James Stephen, technology journalist at UC Today. Please don't forget to like and share this video on your social media pages. Until next time, bye for now.